authored two books, namely Theory of Computation and Compiler Design. Has published a lot of YouTube videos related to Python programming and machine learning. So, Dinya ma'am, we welcome you for the workshop. Now the
Thank
session
you.
is yours.
Thank you. Ma'am, somebody else is presenting, I guess, Gokul R. Yeah, thank you.
Dear participants, in the meanwhile, suppose you are not getting the speaker screen, you pin the speaker screen presentation, you will get. Sometimes somebody is presenting, then the author speaker screen is not visible. At that time, pin the speaker name, the screen will be visible for you. Thank you.
Shall we start, ma'am? Is my screen visible?
Not yet, ma'am. Yeah, right.
Is it
Yes, ma'am.
visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. Yes,
Yeah, okay. A very good morning to all the participants of the workshop. And my formal thanks to Professor Kausalya and Dr. Ananthi for inviting me to the session through which I can also get experience on the topics which I'm going to deliver. Basically, I'm not an expert. I'm just going to share whatever experience I have in this field through either my teaching or working with my students. So actually, this workshop, I hope it is planned since it is a hands-on. This is being planned for a very beginner level, not in a research perspective. So research perspective, for the people who are going to start the research, this might be of use. But for an already experienced machine learning expert or a researcher, I hope you will feel it bored. Okay, so that's what is the assumptions that you have to take before getting into the workshop. And I hope it will not bore the beginner level. So I have made my presentation for these 2 days in such a way that you will get to clearly understand on the basic statistics that is required for ML and the packages that you need to be aware of before getting into learning machine learning algorithm. These two will be trying to cover up by today, and tomorrow probably we can take one data set and we'll try to work on all the possible pre-processing activities, model it with an algorithm, and finally we can see how to analyze the performance measures of it using the different metrics that is available. Probably we can take it one for supervised learning and one another for unsupervised learning. That is the plan that I thought for today and day after today. After this session, if you feel anything else needs to be done by tomorrow, the participants are free to inform. Right. So in the midst, if I'm not, because this is an one-way conversation, I couldn't able to understand how you feel about my presentation. You can stop and you can inform how you want to proceed. Okay. Thank you. So today the topic for concern is statistics for ML or data science. Whatever be the case, the data science or machine learning. Machine learning is also a part of data science. Whatever be it, statistics plays a very important role to start our career in data science or machine learning, either as a beginner or as an expertise. Why statistics? Because when we talk about the difference between your traditional learning environment and our traditional programming and machine learning environment, we understand the fact that the machine has to understand what the human brains thought. Okay, so that is what is the basic definition that people give. So that we need the machines to act like a human being. So how do we act? It is through our experiences, the same way we want the machine to act. How does it happen? It is only through, because in computers we have only the electronic circuits which can work only on the binary numbers 0 and 1. So of course whatever input that we give to the system, it will automatically finally get processed by the means of zeros and ones only. So statistics play a major role. So all the operations needs to be carried out only using the zeros and ones. So any intelligent output that you want the computer to give to you, for example, one popular video that is coming around this on your lockdown period, you could see one old man who is sitting on a sofa in an early morning. Okay, he'll be telling the Alexa, play a song for my wife. Okay, the Alexa intelligently plays a song, which can happily invite her wife onto the room. Okay, so how that intelligence comes in, even though it is a text which is delivered by that old man, actually, in fact, it is converted into zeros and ones by the end, and it is getting computed inside the machine and it is coming out. For us, how this is happening, it is all through the statistics that is happening behind your ML or TL. Okay, so this is going to be the agenda for today, maybe around the 1.5 hours, I hope. So we'll start with a small introduction to machine learning. Hope I won't bore you. Then we'll be dealing with the different data statistics that is required for ML. Then the packages, basic packages that we need to understand before getting into the flow of the machine learning algorithm. So we see how a Jupyter notebook will look like, Google Colab, and this sample data set will take, and whatever statistics we see, we'll try to explore it using the Jupyter notebook. So that's what is the planned agenda for this 1.5 hour session. Okay, so I have some series of questions. I hope chat we cannot answer this as of now, but you just assume that you are answering by yourself. Okay, so what do you like? Is it a static website or a dynamic website? Of course, even my kid doesn't like your static website, right? If the content which is going to be delivered, like for example, earlier in all our college websites, if you took, it's all having static websites. Okay, once in 1 week or once in 2 weeks or once in a month, it gets updated, and people won't like that, right? So since the this generation, what we call as Gen Z, is very adaptive and very flexible and born and work with this digitized environment, the listening time gets reduced. Okay, so within that listening time of 7 minutes, which is stated by the researchers, whatever we are able to deliver has to be delivered to this Gen Z students. So in which case, if you have a static content delivered everywhere, so it's not at all useful. Even if you take the by this time during this lockdown, this big basket, Grofers and Geomart, and if you take Swiggy or Zomato, all are becoming very useful. Okay, in what sense? If it is going to tell you the static content all the time, static, what does it mean? If I'm looking at the website X, if it is looking the same for you also, then we say it is a static website. Okay, so it won't change according to the user, it won't change according to the time. Okay, so in which case we say the websites are said to be static. We never want that kind of website, even a very old man doesn't like. So we always in need of a dynamic website. So how comes this dynamism? Okay, so in certain pages, let's say you have your college website. Now this event is going on. If you want to update it, okay, you can have a dedicated person for the website. You can make it dynamic by time, right? But what happens even when you have humans onto our hand? Okay, there is will be a time delay. Okay, he can update it within 1 hour, within 10 minutes, or within 5 minutes. That's it. Okay, you cannot adapt to the user. Again, it becomes a static, right? So we never, our human minds never like your static website, and hence we go for dynamism. This dynamism is the most important concept. Okay, so again, you see, in our early days, we have this classic phones, right? Nowadays, not even the old age people have, even crossing 75 or 80, wants to have a classic phone. Everyone is in need of this phone, okay, which we call it a smart. So smartphone is what is expected to be in the hands of even all the kids or the old age people. How comes this smartness is the next question, right? How can we achieve this smartness on every environment? See, from the website or your mobile phone, even at home, on your TV, or on any device or gadgets that you have. Okay, let's say you have a watch, fitness band at your home. Everything we want to be smart. Okay, how to achieve this smartness is the next question. Okay, so we want the task to be completed effectively, right? So there is a difference between being effective and being efficient. It's a very major difference or vast difference in terms of the education scenario, or when you particularly define the that is e-learner's perspective. Effective and efficiency becomes a very major difference. Okay, so the effectiveness, it is more or less like validation and verification. So effectiveness in the sense that, are you or whether the system is doing the things, doing right things or not. Okay, so you are trying to design a system to do a particular task, whether your device is doing that task perfectly or not is what will be measured by the effectiveness, right? Efficiency is something different, which means doing things right. Whatever the machine is doing, it is giving a proper output. That's it. We never mind about whether it is giving what it is stated for or not. So that is what we call as efficient. Okay. So most of the cases, instead of efficiency, we want people to be very effective in the work environment. Similar way, we want all our gadgets to be very effective. So how do you achieve this effectiveness, be it a human being or be it your what to say your devices or the gadgets at your hand? How can you make the task to be effective? Okay, so that is through the possible experiences that we have. So the human being, how do you say that this person is effective at the workplace? Okay, he is so based on the output, right? So how is it he able to give a proper output? It is through the experiences that he got, and he is rightly trained by means of all the experiences that he's having in his life, and based on that he is able to give a effective result. Okay, you could see, 1 minute. Yeah, you could see this leveling bar over here. Okay, so all the task needs to be done effectively with the experience that you give, and it has to be on a balanced way. Okay, so if it is imbalanced, then either of the case, see, if the experiences are not proper, your task may not be effective, rather it will go to an efficient manner, or in sometimes both the cases will not be there, right? So you have to have a right balance between all these things, in which case we say we have achieved the smartness, right? So having achieved the smartness, okay, then is it enough? Okay, to achieve, to state that I'm smart enough to work on an environment, or my gadget is smart enough to accommodate all the needs of the people, right? How do you measure it? That's the next question, right? So it's not at all enough for you to state that I'm good and effective. So how do you measure the smartness is the next case. Okay, so this is being measured all over. See, everywhere, if you look at college level, we have a performance evaluation. At corporate level, you have a performance evaluation. Students, if you take, they have the grading criteria, CGPA, which can state their performance. Emission, running time without the availability is the performance. Everywhere, if you see, there is a stated criteria through which the performance of the system will be measured. Okay, and that is more important, right? So the scale of the smartness can be measured, or how good the smartness of a particular gadget is can be measured by using the performance metrics. This will vary from situation to situation, and this will vary from requirement to requirement. Okay, not all the things needs to have a different same performance level. It will vary. How can you improve this performance? That's the next question. Okay, so let's say when you have looked at my first seminar some few years back, okay, I may not be proficient in communication, I may not be proficient in preparing this PPT, I may not be proficient enough in delivering a lecture. Okay, how do you improve your performance step by step is the next question. Okay, of course we all know it is only through experience, right? This experience has to be proper in a right direction. If I have given by the proper feedback from the people who attended my session, okay, so on the direction of where I have to improve, that is what I call it as my experience. So through that your performance can be improved. Okay, now I hope you would have better understand on why smartness is required, and how this smartness can be achieved, and how it has needs to be measured. Okay, so this is more important. Okay, and from whom this is expected, right? So this effectiveness or smartness, from which category are you going to expect? Okay, of course from the human beings it's more important, right? So any human being, we want it to be more smart. See, you say there is a quote in the industry itself, right? So be smart rather than working hard. Okay, so actually whether it is correct or not doesn't matter, but the industry is requiring it, and we need to be adaptive and flexible to the industry. So the human beings needs to be very smart. By so he can achieve that smartness by using the experience, and we won't stop with this human being itself. Okay, by nature, automatically whenever we are increasing, when a person grows older, which means the experience gets increased, we become smart. Okay, but we want the same equivalent smartness to be achieved from the computers also, right? So that's what is the most critical task people end up with. Okay, this any machine that you look at, see, even though it looks like a computer, whatever we have at your hand, even a small fitness band or an iPad which is at our home, or any device if you take, we need smartness. Okay, how to have that smartness? That is through only one concept, which is called as your learning, right? So this learning, when it is done by a human being, we say it is a normal human learning. When it is done by machine, we call it as machine learning. That's all. Okay, so what is learning? Learning from the experience. That's all. So machine learning is nothing but a learning strategy that the machine will adopt to make itself very smart. So how to achieve that smartness? That's what we have discussed earlier. Now, hence, what is machine learning now? So we'll fix up. So we need to have every one of us, whether the human being or your machine, is gaining experience. Human being automatically gets imbibed onto our mind, but experiences for the machine is not like so. You have to feed in the proper style, right? Otherwise, the Endiran 2.2 or the previous Endiran, what will be the result? The experience has to be on the proper direction of how we need to have it. Okay, and with this experience you need to do a particular task. Okay, so what for you are trying to be very smart, that can be achieved by using this experiences. Okay, how to measure? So okay, I have acquired enough experience, with that I'm doing a task. How should I know whether I'm correct or not? That is by using this performance metrics. Okay, it will say whether the machine or the human being is proper in their direction or not. Okay, so that is what is a crisp of your machine, what machine learning is. Okay, now coming to understand, see, all we have discussed about experience and all, right? How do you know how to measure, collect this experience is the next question. Okay, this is more important. Okay, so how to collect the experience? So whatever be the case, okay, so from wherever you collect, let's say you are collecting from Instagram, you are collecting from Twitter, or whatever be the podium of interest, or you are collecting from a sensor which is standing on a roadside. Okay, and this police arrest case, okay, where the cameras are hidden on the roadside from which you are collecting data, whatever be it, in whatever format, let it be an image, let it be a text, or let it be any number, or a video, whatever it is, finally you need to convert it into a tabular column of this kind, right? Wherein every column will correspond to the feature of the domain of interest. Let's say if I'm talking about student domain, this feature one may be the roll number of the student. Okay, so you may have roll number, and this feature 2 may be the name of the student. Okay, and feature 3 may be the marks he scored or the CGPA he scored. Okay, so any number of features you can have depending on the domain of interest. Why domain of interest? So the feature set is not at all fixed. It depends on how you want. Okay, the same student, if you want to ascertain his performance after placement, marks are not needed. Rather, the performance at the industry is needed. Okay, so depending on the domain and the task that we are going to do, you can have any features and these features form the columns, right? And what is this? This is nothing but the experience of the first candidate. Okay, so when I started cycling, what is my first experience? Okay, so whether to pedal the right pedal or the left one, or whether should I apply brake, how many times I fall, anything you can take, and that becomes my first experience. So the second experience, second day I'm going for cycling, I'll add all my experiences. Nth day, okay, so suppose if I'm going to cycle practice for 100 days, I'll give the 100 experiences. Okay, as and when you increase your experience, your data grows, and altogether if you look at having the rows, which is nothing but the entities, the experiences of entities, and the columns which defines the attribute set, this attribute set may grow whenever you are increasing your expertise. See, after 50th day of cycling, if I am proficient in the features which I have discussed, I may want to include one more column, okay, to state in how many minutes I am reaching my destination, which may not be there for previous 49 columns, which could be assumed as null, and it could be there for the next column, right? So this feature set will increase depending on the scenario or the type of experience that you get. So that is what is how to store the experiences, and finally we call this to be the data set. Okay, so the data set, what people are talking about, it's very simple. It is nothing but the experience that we get on a particular domain. Okay. Now, how much experience to collect is the next question. Okay. How do you collect experience and how much is the experience? So, I forget to place a line. Okay. So, first we'll discuss about these two. Okay. So, there are two important terms in statistics which we call it as population and sample. Okay. What is a population? Population is nothing but the set of all entities of the domain of interest. Okay. For example, how many people will have the BMW car in Chennai city? Right. So if I want to get the feedback of all the people who's having BMW car in this Chennai city, okay, so is it infinite or finite, or is it uncountable, or it's very huge? No, right? If it is BMW, only a few people would have, maybe in hundreds. That's all. Okay, may not be in hundreds also. But assuming that when you, so if there exists a provision to collect the feedback or the experience from all the people of the domain of interest, we say it is a population. Okay, you have a very limited crowd. Let's say it might be in tens or hundreds or thousands, but you know that these are the only restricted set from whom we are going to collect the data. That is what we call it as population. The next is what we call a sample. Okay, let's say on the other case, how many of the people I want to collect the feedback from all the users of Maruti Suzuki. Okay, can you get collect information from all the people? Of course it's not possible, because we don't know how many such people would be there. Okay, and we can't even get the information because so many dealers are there, people might be coming from other states, and so many other things are there, right? So in which case, going to a population is not at all possible, and we go for sampling. Sampling means what? Car wise you can take, for you have Wagoner, you can take a group of users of Wagoner. You have Baleno, you can take a group of users of Baleno. Likewise, based on category you can do, or else based on area wise you can go. Anyway, it's an indicative group of people who is considered to be the representative of this population. That's what we call it as sample. So both terms need to be understood very clearly for the domain of interest that you are going to have, right? And coming to the different variables that you have at your hand, let's say you in your here you can see there are different variables: feature 1, feature 2, and feature 3. Okay, what are the different class of variables that you have? So we have an explanatory variable. So it is nothing but explanatory variable are nothing but your input variables. Okay, and otherwise it is called as independent variable. And next you can otherwise called as your predictor variables also. Okay, for example, if I'm going to add one more, the fourth feature, feature 4 is nothing but the grade he is getting. Okay, if I say that these three are my inputs, roll number, name, and then marks are my input, and finally I may need to calculate grade as my output, right? These three forms your input, and this is called as your output. That's all, right? Not every particular data set needs to have an output column. Sometimes the output column may not present. Accordingly, we say the data set to be of different categories. But most of the cases, when we collect the data, we say there exist features which can be categorized into input feature as well as your output feature. We say that the input features are independent among each other. Okay, that's one assumption which machine learning have. But you can manually formulate the relationship between different features, and you can work on it. But in general, we say that there exists an independency among the features, and the output column, which is this column, is dependent on these things. So since this is a calculative performance of this input feature, we say this is a dependent variable, and that's what is written here: input variable, independent variable, or predictor variable, which is in technical we call it as an explanatory variable. And here if you see the output variable, dependent variable, or which is called as your outcome variable, we give the word, that is we indicate technically it as a response variable, right? Both are important for a data set. Suppose in case if you don't have a response variable, we say it is an unsupervised learning. Okay, there are two categories of ML. One is supervised, another one is unsupervised. Bear with my I'm writing with my mouse, that's why. data. So supervised in the sense you will have an explanatory variable along with the response variable, output variable. If you don't have a response variable, we say it is unsupervised learning, right? So you assume all the cameras fitted onto signals or on the streets are collecting data, but it's not conveying any decision, right? So it is just collecting a data. We are gathering it as a data set, for example, let's assume. So if it is not, if not every image is mapped onto a particular output, in which case it is an unsupervised data. Okay, so this is about how much you have to collect the experience and how the experiences vary as an explanatory variable and a response variable, right? So coming to the different type of variables that you can have, we have two basic types. One is quantitative, another one is qualitative, right? So quantitative variable, as we see, it is any numbers that you find on the data set will be of quantitative type. Any non-numeric number data that you see on the data set we call qualitative variable. Okay, if I'm going to collect feedback of this session, okay, in terms of numbers of this range from 0 to 10, we say it is a quantitative variable, right? So you are quantifying, right? So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, we are quantifying those, that is quantitative data. In other words, if I say it is bad, or if it is good, or if it is fair, we say it is qualitative variable, right? You are ascertaining the quality by means of text, okay, or binary numbers or anything, and hence we say it is a qualitative variable. Okay, so these are the two possible type of data that you can have on the data set. And coming to numerical data, again there are two categories. One is continuous in the sense I can define a range. Let's say all the marks can fall between 0 to 100 for a student. That is the range that I'm giving. So I'm permitting any value in between 0 to 100 as a value for this continuous data, or as a column, right? 95 could be my value, 96 could be my value, 95.3 could also be my value. That is continuous data. But if I say that I can have only grades, okay, so like what are the grades you have? You have A grade, you have B grade, you have S grade, and it goes. Okay, so for example, if I'm defining 6 grades, okay, 5 grades to start with the 50 to 100, and less than 50 is the 6th grade, which is E or F, we say it is discrete. Okay, so you are mapping this continuous data onto a finite set of variables or the values, and in which case we call it as discrete. Okay, so coming to now qualitative variable, which is on the other side of non-numerical data, you can have three different categories. One is binary, which is 0 or 1. The other case is nominal. Nominal in the sense, let's say the country you belong to, you are loading. So India, okay, and US, UK, anything you write, there is no the relation between India or UK or US. It's just a value, right? State representing a fact. That way, if you have the values, that is nominal value, right? So again, the next case is ordinal. Ordinal is like your feedback, right? So if I give very bad or good or very good or fair, we say there exists a relationship between the value one and the other. Okay, so if there exists a relationship, then we say the values are ordinal. And there are two more categories also. One is interval and another one is ratio scale in normal scales of measurement, but those are not being used in machine learning. Okay, so the reason being, here the experiences are assumed to be independent among each other. Okay, so we never know that the person, that is the data that is collected by the person 1 and the person 2 has a relationship. We assume that there exists an independence, and hence only these two scales are being used. Okay, and coming to the type of statistics, what you can do with this, we have two types of statistics that we normally use. Descriptive statistic. Descriptive in the sense, as the name English meaning of descriptive indicates. So given a data set, what are the different ways in which you can describe the data? Okay, so describe in the sense, you may want to say that my data is positively skewed. You may want to say that my data is normally distributed. It holds good for a Poisson distribution for this many count of people. Likewise, if you want to talk in terms of description of how your data looks like, we say it is descriptive data type. For example, you can use different central tendency like mean, median, mode, or anything. So central tendency theorem you can apply, and all those comes under descriptive statistics. Next comes your inferential statistics. Inferential in the sense, okay, so when your population is very large and when you are not able to do, let's say, a lot of present day algorithms, if you use TensorFlow and all, it goes for batch processing, right? You have 10,000 data, and if you, or 1 lakh data or 10 lakh data, okay, which your system cannot take one by one and run. So if you have the multi cores or multiple GPUs, what it is doing, it is subdividing the data. That's what is the concept of your Hadoop architecture or big data, right? Divide your data among into different number of batches, run the batches individually, and that's what we call it as sample. And finally generalize your population. Okay, you, whatever results you are acquiring from the sample, use it, apply some kind of method, that is decision making over the samples, and generalize it to conclude it for the population from which you have drawn the sample. That is what inferential statistics. Okay, so it depends on the inference that you are getting from the sample. So these are the two kinds of statistics that we use. Okay, and what are the different descriptive statistics that we have? Mean is nothing but the average of all the values that we have on a particular data set. Median, it is the central value. Okay, given a set of values, you arrange it on in a ascending order, that is from small to big, and the central element, if it is odd numbered value, let's say you have 99 values, you could see the 50th value to be the middle value. If you have 100 values, so you have to sum up the middle two value, and the average of that becomes your median. Then mode, it is the repeatedly occurring entity in your column. Okay, you can have one mode, two mode, or three mode, depending on how many you have. Basically, when you have the mean and median can be used when you have what to say, continuous data, and mode could be used when you have categorical data. So that's where we use. Even if you somebody has used the algorithms, ML algorithm, you can understand. And unsupervised clustering, we have k-means, k-median, and k-mode algorithms, where k-mode is specially used for clustering the data which is having the categorical values. If it has numerical values, you can go for median and mean. And measures of, this is measures of center, in which case if you want to identify, okay, what is the center of the data set that we do have, you can go for any of these measures. And about the range, okay, how it is distributed, what is the range that if you want to take it, these are all the things. General range is minimum to maximum. Given a data set, what is the minimum value, what is the maximum value, that is the range. Then interquartile range, this is more important for the marketing industry to assert. Not only marketing, if you want to understand how the data gets distributed within some points of range, we say it is interquartile. We'll shortly see in the box plot. And variance, okay, so how your data is different from the other. Okay, so this variance can be taken either from the mean or from the sample or from anywhere, but in general this variance is nothing but it configures or it states the deviation from a standard point, that is variance. Then standard deviation, this is very important, which is an observable measure that we should understand. So understanding the mean of your population or median of your population, whichever you have at your hand, how every entity varies from that, which is, so for example, if mu is what is the mean you have, sorry, you have, and if x is your data point, x minus m divided by total number of values will be your standard deviation in general. So there are different multiple ways to do that. So in general, the understanding or the meaning is that how a particular entity is deviated from the mean of the data can be understood by the standard deviation. So these are the measures of range. And coming to inferential statistics, the only concept that is very important to understand is your hypothesis testing. Okay, how do you know whether to go with your current decision or to stick on to your previous decision can be understood by using this hypothesis testing, right? So this is more or less like a proof of contradiction, which normally we use in all theorem proving concepts. we will set a in proof of contradiction given a statement X. We will assume that it's a contradictory statement X bar is true, and we'll start proceeding. Finally, if you couldn't prove this statement, alternate statement, we assume that the previous one is correct. Okay, so it is more or less like whether earth is flat or something likewise. The same concept applies here. You have null hypothesis and you have alternate hypothesis, right? So this null hypothesis you can set, okay, to a concept. For example, currently if I'm using a IFB washing machine at my home, okay, suppose if someone says that LG is good, and you can, if I have the concept of changing. Suppose if somebody says that LG is better than IFB and you can go, okay, I can set the null hypothesis to be yes, LG is better, and the alternate hypothesis to be no, IFB is still, IFB itself is better. Likewise, so this is in contradictory statement between one another, right? So having set these two, you proceed, okay, with whatever modeling you have, and finally based on the result you decide, okay, whether to stick on to null hypothesis or to stick on to alternate hypothesis. Okay, there are different ways and means to do that. One way is to understand the p value. Okay, and p value, we say actually by research it means that when you are, let's say if I'm setting the p value to be 0.05, by standard or by research it says p value has to be less than 0.05, which means I can accept a deviation of 5%, right? So if I'm going for my null hypothesis, if I say that my acceptance level of 5% can be understood, or is it okay, I can accept the null hypothesis, or else I will reject and I'll go for alternate hypothesis. Okay, so this is used when you don't have a predefined statistical procedure to decide whether my statement is correct or not. Okay, since most of the machine learning algorithm goes with optimization, and since we don't have a clear cut decision making, we go for this hypothesis testing, which will be of use, right? So coming to the type of visualization that you have and what pertains to what. Okay, so coming to the visualization of continuous data, there are different kinds of graph structures that you can use for understanding or analyzing. The first one being the histogram, right? So histogram is a kind of histogram is a kind of chart that you can use to understand how the range of data falls within, that is your continuous data falls within a specific range. Okay, so this is the kind of histogram that you can get. Similarly, you have scatter plot. This is more important to understand how whether you can apply linear algorithms or not, right? You can draw different kinds of scatter plot. This is, see, if you say this is by means of hue, you can set a hue. Hue is nothing but on what basis you have to draw a chart. So this is a scatter plot, and everything indicates the corresponding data points on a day. And you have box plot. This box plot I'll come back. This is more important for different kinds of understanding on your statistics. This I'll come back in detail, we'll discuss. And if you see, these are the bar chart. Histogram and bar chart, the difference being histogram will tell how many data are present on a particular range. Okay, bar chart for a particular day, given range, that is this range we will fix. Okay, what is the frequency that you have? So both are contradictory to each other. In some cases, if you fix the range itself to be the value of bar chart, it acts like a histogram. And you have pie charts, very effective pie charts to indicate, but you should not use pie chart whenever you have more number of indications. You can go up to a till 5 to 7 categories is what is the defined procedure for pie chart. Okay, so these are the different small visualization. Along with that, you have different kinds of visualizations, like line chart you have, and then line plot you have. Okay, and in Seaborn you have pair plot, so many other different kinds. I'll shortly discuss it with the execution. But these are, mainly to understand the continuous data has to be understood by using histogram, scatter plot, and the box plot. Whereas the discrete values has to be understood by using this kind of bar chart as well as pie chart. I'm talking only with the machine learning perspective, and hence it goes like this. Okay. And what are the different probability theorems that we use? Okay, very basic, very easy. The basic probability is the number of outcome divided by total number of occurrences. This outcome is nothing but the outcome of interest. Suppose if I'm tossing a coin, my interest is head, means that is what I call as the outcome, right? Then probability of two independent events, right? So two independent events, let's say if both I need to happen, P of A plus P of B, or if it is or either of the one should happen, you have to subtract this common terminology. And this is the most important concept that we will use in machine learning, conditional probability. Okay, actually basically this algorithm is taken by Bayes, and we call it as naive Bayes algorithm. It states probability of the happening of A such that B has already happened. Okay. Suppose if I have a chill weather today, what is the probability of raining? Right. B is a chill weather. It already happened. The weather is chill. And what is the probability of raining? A. That can be, that is what we call as conditional probability. It means that B has already happened. And hence it can be calculated using this. So P of B by A is what is called as your prior probability. We already have a knowledge of having the weather as P. Okay. So that is chill weather. How many days we have that it has been rained, so that is given by this formula, along with the total probability of A and B can be understood by this conditional probability, and it has needs to be clearly understood. This is a concept which is used in machine learning, so I'm listing out only the concepts that is being used in machine learning. Okay, and coming to the probability distribution function, for discrete we normally use binomial distribution and Poisson. Poisson is for a range, binomial is for a particular value we'll be using. For continuous, mean median mode already we discussed. This normal distribution is what everybody has to understand very clearly before getting into ML algorithms. Every data we want to be normally distributed everywhere we go, be it in your school or in a corporate or in any business or anything. We want normal distribution to be followed by the data set that we have at our hand. Skewness is the alignment towards one side. Okay, from your mean or from your median. Okay, how your data gets distributed, whether it is equally distributed. If it gets equally distributed, we say it comes under normal distribution. If not, either it will be more biased towards left or biased towards right. Okay, in which case we call it as negative skewness or positive skewness. Okay. Okay, so coming to normal distribution, this rule is what people have to understand. 68, 95, 99.7 rule, with which all the algorithms work. Actually, this point we call it as the mean. Okay, so this is the mean of your distribution. So mean is indicated by this symbol mu. Okay, so and what is this 1 sigma? Okay, so I'll show you with one example. Just I'm switching back to an Excel. Ma'am, is my Excel visible? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay. So I just have taken a very simple sample data having this I took from internet only. It is an example for it's an example for your what to say the normal distribution data set. You could see actually it has some around 100 columns. You can see the count is 100. So it is 100 rows or 100 data we do have. I have ordered it in a sequence manner, sorry, in a sorting order. And what is the central value we have? Since we have 100 values, the minimum, sorry, middle two we have to take, which is in the 50th row and the 51st row. You take it as an average, and that becomes your mean. Okay, so now what we do, I'll be just calculating the average. Average is nothing but the mean of this, right? So average of all the data whichever we have. you could see it is 45.5. Okay, then I'm going to calculate standard deviation. I'm assuming that as a population. Okay, so population, it will divide by n. If you take sample, it will be divide by n minus 1. In Excel, we have a clear difference. Standard deviation dot p is there for population, dot s is there for sample, right? Standard deviation of, so again I'm going to take the same sample. 3.9 is my mu, right? So this is mean and 3.9 is my mu. Okay, now what is 1 sigma, right? So 1 sigma is nothing but what is the value between from 45.5. If you increase this, okay, on to the left, you subtract. So the possible values that you can take in the range is 41.6. Okay, on to the right, how much you can go when you plus 1 sigma, that is given by 45.5 plus 3.9. Okay, so what is the range of values that you can consider for the values between minus 1 sigma to plus 1 sigma is 41.6 to 49.4. Okay, I'll just filter out the values. You see, number filters between 41.6 and I hope it is 49.4. Okay. So I have filtered. Let's see how many values. See, you can see it is 68 value. Okay, so that is the meaning of minus 1 sigma and plus 1 sigma, right? So when we go back and explain, you could see this is the mean. Okay, so mean is nothing but 45.5 in our case. Okay, so this one minus 1 sigma is nothing but you calculate the standard deviation, and from the mean onto our left means you can subtract that standard deviation till that values becomes your minus 1 sigma, and plus 1 is when you add up the sigma, that is standard deviation. So this entire area, okay, or 68 percentage of, since we have 100 values, 68 means 68 percentage of that value. Okay, 68 percentage of the value should fall between minus 1 sigma to 1 sigma. If you say that your data set that is follows normal distribution. Similarly, 2 sigma. 2 sigma means what to do? That mu value minus 2 into our standard deviation, mu value plus 2 into our standard deviation. Okay, if you filter out all the values within that range, you should see it should for 95.4%, that is around 95 values should fall within this range, right? And hence if you go for 3 sigma and minus 3 sigma, if you say 99.7, so formally 100 rows, if you round up 100% of these of the values will go beyond, which meaning that after that whatever value will fall over this range, we call it as an outlier. Okay, outlier is nothing but the values that are not pertaining to the characteristic of the current data set that we have. Okay, suppose you have a class of 60 student. Okay, almost all the 58 student may be in a same alignment, right? One student may be overqualified to sit in our class, in which case we cannot cope up with his expectation. Another student may be very dull due to some reason or other, in which case we may not be able to teach him properly. So those we call it as our outliers. Okay, so anything that fall behind this. So you take any data set when you are able, when you are about to find whether your data set follows a normal distribution, this is the way to find. We can have deviation, but it should not be more than a particular value. Let's say instead of 68, if I have 65%, okay, I can say more or less it follows my normal distribution. But if there is a very much difference, we cannot say. So I hope the normal distribution curve is understood. Okay, and this is normalization. Why normalization is important, or standardization in general we call, but in technical terms we call normalization. Okay, so normalization is to understand what kind of that is deviation our data set has, right? So because every data, if you say, if you have 5 columns, every column may have data in one range, right? One may have data in lakhs, one may have in ones, twos, in tens, one may have in hundreds. Okay, so having a look at the value, you cannot really observe how deviated the data is. Okay, so in order to make it standardized, for us to better visualize and come out with a decision, we go for normalization. This is standard normal distribution. You see the mean 1010, we say, so it is converted as a 0. Okay, so the mean value will become 0, and all the values, that is any normal distribution, we call it as a standard normal distribution when its mean is 0, median. So how will this come when the mean becomes your 0, or when the average or the median becomes your 0? When you normally, that is to normalize your data set. When you normalize your data set, not automatically this value gets converted into this value, and this is more easier for us for understanding and decision making. Okay, but nevertheless, the characteristic of the data will not change while doing your normalization. That's the fact. Okay, and this diagram is not clear, but bear with me. This is for understanding the skewness. See, if this is mean median mode, okay, which is the same when you say it is a perfect standard normal distribution. A normal distribution will look like this. Okay, so it will have a symmetry onto the left and onto the right, and the data will equally get distributed over here. But if you look at this, okay, so if this is mode, okay, what is mode? Why is it on the peak? Because this is the heavily occurring pattern. So you have median over here, you have mean over here. If you see onto the left of your mode, all the values relay, and hence this is negatively skewed data. And here if you see from the mode, this is positively skewed data. Positively skewed means most of your class students are more than average. Okay, this is the most of your class students are less than average. That can be understood by using this skewness, and these are all the preliminary operations that we need to possibly understand and analyze before getting into a ML algorithm. Right. So based on that, again, one more concept is there, kurtosis. So this is more important to understand how the sigma values or the actual values gets distributed from the mean. See, you could see this is the mean line. Okay. So when there exists a normal distribution means what? So here, if you see, all the values are equally distributed. That is from the mean, when it goes to 3 sigma or minus 3 sigma to 3 sigma, there is a flow, right? The curve is very smooth. So that is, sorry, I'm talking about the green curve. Okay, this green curve. Okay, so this is a normal distribution, right? Now if you see when the movement from your minus 3 sigma towards the mean, and from the mean to the plus 3 sigma is very normal, and hence the kind of normal distribution, we call it as mesokurtic. Okay, this is what is the appropriate data set for machine learning. But if you see here, most of the values are aligned near to the mean. Okay, so here if you see the plus 3 sigma, no, immediately it moves on rising to, that is moving towards the mean. Okay, you can see this red line. Okay, so this kind of curves, we call it as your leptokurtic curves, which means that the values are populated towards the mean, okay, rather than getting equally distributed. Again, it is a symmetric normal distribution only. In normal distribution itself, depending on how good the values are being segregated, we say it is a kleptokurtic, mesokurtic, or platykurtic. So this platykurtic, in the sense, again, this is a normal distribution. But if you see, the values are not aligned towards the mean. Okay, so you can see a flattened surface over here. Okay, if the values are within this range, it is platykurtic. In all the 3 cases, all are normal distributions, but this green means when the data set is mesokurtic, which is we say that it is best suited for your machine learning algorithm. Right. And coming to the relationship between variables. Okay, and basically these 3 needs to be understood. One is correlation, which talks about the relationship between one variable to another variable. One is variable 1, another one is variable 2. When there is an unit increase or unit decrease in the variable 1, okay, how this variable 2 acts. Okay, when there is an unit increase, is there an increase in V2 or is there a decrease in V2? Okay, so either of the things, either it could be directly proportional or inversely proportional. In either case, there should be a proportionality. That is what we call it as positive correlation. Okay, when there is an increase, if there is an increase here also, we say it is positively correlated. When it is an inverse proportion, okay, when this increases, Okay, when this decreases or when this decreases, this increases, we say it is negatively correlated. But on either of the cases, one is impacting the other variable, and hence it is positive correlation or negative correlation. But if you could not see any of the difference, okay, there we say no correlation exists. So most of the time, some series will be given to us, okay, on the soft skill exam, and we'll be asked to find out what is the next term in the series. Okay, so we always try to find out what is the proportion in which there exists a relationship between those two variables. That's what we call it as correlation. Okay, and the second is analysis of variance, which we call it as ANOVA. Right, this is a more important concept to understand how the samples behave. Right, we were talking about population and a sample. From a population, if you are dividing the population into some 10 sample, let's say, okay, how each and every sample deviates from one another can be understood by using this ANOVA. It's a simple standard deviation procedure or the variance that we calculate, and these variances will be put together. Finally will be telling whether the actual samples go in a proper way, or when one is getting deviated abruptly than the other or not. That is given by analysis of variance. Right, again a similar test we do have, a chi-square test, which is also very similar to square SSE, that is square sum of square error. Okay, so the concept is very similar. We'll end up with a value through which you can decide whether the model could be taken up for processing or not. Okay, so these are the different relation between variables that we need to understand. Hope my theory part is over. I'll just switch on to the implementation part. Yeah, this is our Jupyter notebook that we do have. Okay, so we have NumPy, the different kinds of packages that is required for machine learning to be understood. Okay, or any other doubts people have till now? Or shall I proceed? Anandi ma'am?
Ma'am, there is no more doubts, ma'am, up to now.
Okay. Okay.
Ma'am,
So, yeah,
present your screen, ma'am. Your screen is not visible.
No, it should have come now. Just check. Maybe there should be a delay in delivery.
It's visible, ma'am. Kausalya, ma'am.
Visible,
just
ma'am?
Yes, it's visible for me actually now.
Yeah. There should be a delay. It will come for
Okay,
us
ma'am.
others.
Kindly check. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the Jupyter Notebook environment. Actually, for machine learning implementation, we can choose any multiple platforms are there, multiple programming languages are there. So the best, actually, most of the people use R tool earlier. Depending on the convenience and the addition of different open source packages, now the community is moving on to using Python. In Python, you have multiple thousands of packages that is coming up daily. Even if we talk now, there might be an open source package that would have been added to the Python library. Name anything, any operation in the computer industry, so the Python is getting explode like anything. Okay, so coming to machine learning, again you have this environment is what is Jupyter Notebook. It's not restricted to use only with this. You can go for any environment, but I am comfortable with Jupyter Notebook in the sense that there are two main reasons here. You can have a combination of document as well as coding. Okay, here you see I have written a document followed by coding. I have written a document followed by coding, which is very easier. Similarly, you can write codes, okay, in blocks, and you can leave out some blocks and you can execute only whichever is required. So there are so many advantages of Jupyter Notebook, but it's not restricted. Okay, to install this, actually either you can have core Python installed, over which you have to install the required packages using pip install, or else when you download the wrapper Anaconda is a wrapper available. Wrapper in the sense you have the core Python, over which they already have installed all the necessary packages and they give you as a whole software. Okay, that if you download, it comes by default with this Jupyter Notebook. So when you open, the environment will look like this. Now this is a text cell which I have written. So I have copy pasted one image. You could see it is image.png. So the execution, you can just use run or else control enter. That's all. Okay. So I'm importing the package like in C or C++ where we have the header files. We do have packages here. When object oriented programming comes into practice, the header files are called as your packages. Okay, so NumPy stands for numerical Python. It is a numerical Python package that is available to execute all the numerical operations. Okay, so as NP, I'm creating an alias or an object for it. That's all. Instead of using NumPy everywhere, you can use NP. Right, I'll just quickly show this. Lot of things are there. If you want, you can get to my channel, or else if you want, I can send you this also. No issues. So you can create arrays using array of. Okay, so there exists a difference between this array and normal list in Python. This can go with only numeric data, not textual data, where a list can have multiple data types combined together, right? So you can have single dimension array, you can have multi-dimension array. So and different attributes you can print. What is the type, data type, size, how many dimensions does it take? Everything you can do. And the biggest advantage is you can create arrays initialized with any value as you want. See, you can have given arrays with 0, 1, and an identity matrix, random values initialized to how many ever you want. Okay, suppose in the next case I have created an integer random array. That is also possible. And arrays could be used with range. Okay, let's say if I want to create, okay, the list of all students having roll numbers from 1 to 60, I can do it with using a range. A range stands for array range. Automatically it creates an array. Okay, so you can use step values either. So here I have used 2, so 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 is being used. And one more very important concept that we use, see, this LIN space is used mostly in machine learning in order to create as many data that you want. So here NP range, the inputs being start, the end value. In Python, normally the end value is excluded. So the values will be taken 1 minus that. So 1 is the start value, 9 is the ending value. What is the stepping criteria? So step value is 2, that is given here. We won't instruct on A range how many such values needs to be created. We tell the system from where it has to start, from where it has to end, where it has to end, and what is the step every time we do have. Here in LIN space, we say we want values from 1 to 50. And we want 50 values in between. That's all. Okay, so it will automatically find out how much should be the difference between each and every value, and it will print for you. Here in LIN space, both are included. So it will start with 1 and it will end till 50, and it will distribute 50 values for you. That is that. And slicing is a very powerful power packed parameter in NumPy. Slicing is getting any portion of it. Okay, you can have 2378 printed, you can have 2749 printed, you can have 17, 18, 13, 12 printed. Anything, even without and with a particular value, can be taken out from any sized array using this NumPy. The only concept we need to understand is how to give the range. Okay, so as usual, the first parameter, the first that is, if you look here, ARR10 of 1. For the first parameter refers to the row, second parameter refers to the column. So 1 means, the index starts with 0. So row 1 means this row. Okay, you have values 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And if I want all the values of columns to be printed, I can just give a colon. Okay, it will print. Otherwise, if I want to print only 7 and 8, I have to start with 7, which is at the index, column index 1, and 8, I have to stop with column index 2, and you have to give 3. Okay, so because the last value will not be taken. So that's how I've given a lot of examples. And masking. Okay, so here if you look at image processing, no application you can run without this masking, right? So most of the time we may want to hide the background images. How do we do? By using this masking. So that masking is made very easy here. You can mask whichever bits you want, whichever bits you don't want, by using simple mask, and that will give you the output. Okay, And you see all the basic operations. Okay, so all the statistical operations are available at your hand within a simple keyword, and you can have average as well as weighted average, right? So weighted average in the sense, for every column you can specify how much weight you need to give, and depending on that you can calculate the weight, because it's a fact that if you have 100 columns, not all the 100 columns needs to be given equal input or impact. That impact can be set by using weighted average, right? And you have scalar operations in the sense you don't need to bother about how multiplication happen, addition, subtraction. You can do it as simple as that of a normal addition operation. Okay, similarly relational operations are also possible. You don't need to write for loop to run across finding out every value is correct. Just the same relational operation you can use and you can get through, right? And you have trigonometric values, you have logarithmic operations, everything is possible. And this shows the power packed performance of NumPy. And the next important package that you need to understand is the pandas, right? So what is pandas? Okay, so you can create data frame. That pandas is a package that is available to create data frames for further processing, because we have seen that in machine learning all the input has to be converted into the form of a data, that is matrix. Okay, more or less it is a relational database, that's all. So we do have columns there. Yes, we do have. It is a table. Table will be filled with rows and columns. That's all. Okay, that is done with the help of a data frame in pandas. So this data frame is nothing but a table. Okay, you can assume like that. So since it is more related to a relational database, whatever operation you want to do, you can do. You can create a table, you can insert, you can delete, you can modify. Okay, you can write a select query and you can find out what is the not select query here. I'm just telling you can just use the rows and column values like how we have seen in the slicing operation now to get the values printed. It's more or less like a select operation, right? So now the most important concept, we normally want to load the data set onto the data frame or onto the Jupyter Notebook environment for further processing. Okay, a simple command will do. So df2 is equal to pd.read underscore csv of, this is the file, this is the location where I have diabetes.csv. Okay, so I can print the shape of it. 768 number of rows are there and 9 columns are there. Okay, we can't print all the 768 rows. It will be very massive and clumsy, and hence head and tail are there to print first 5 lines or the last 5 lines. Okay, so you do some operations on the data set. Finally, if you want to write it back, a simple command will do 2 underscore csv. Whatever content is there in the data frame df2, it will be written on to 2 underscores, that is this corresponding file using this 2 underscore csv, right? And if your data set doesn't have index, you can set for a quicker processing and all the operations that you can do. Okay, so this describe is one important data with which we can explain the box chart, box plot also. So you see any data set can be explained. Otherwise I'll show the same data set and I'll do. And how to access using the index, that's more important. There are 2 techniques in which you can use ILOC, index location. Okay, and LOC by using the location itself. Both you can use. See, ILOC, you give the index or the number in which your row is correspondingly present, it will take out for you. Okay, so this pandas, you don't need to bother too much, even though it's more important. You can very easily understand because it directly relates to a relational database, right? Then this NumPy is for numerical operation, pandas is for loading and doing the operations on the data set whichever you have at your hand. Then after performing that, how will you visualize? That's the more important concept, right? So this visualization is given by using a lot of visualization libraries are there. PyPart and Seaborn are most importantly used. PyPart is the basic version. The Seaborn is advanced. It's written over PyPlot to have some that is extended visualization, that's all. Okay, and this is, I'll just show the plots that we have plotted and you can have a look at it later. So this is line plot. Okay, and this is also a line plot. and you see this is also a line plot. Okay, depending on the values that we give, the structure varies. That's all. This is a straight line, this is slightly curved, and this is a sine curve, right? And this is also a line plot we have drawn for two different lines, okay, having the markers over here. And you have scatter plots. Okay, so what is a line plot? If you interconnect line in between these dots, that becomes your line plot, not more than that. Okay, and this is the data. This is actually a line plot only, sorry, scatter plot only, but the points are too closer such that it looks like a line plot. And you have twin axis. This is specially available in this pie plot. You can have single x, that is single x, and both the sides you can have y1 and y2 on its side. Okay, so x versus x squared, x versus x cube. Okay, the only important concept is there should be a common x value that should be there. Okay, and you can have different kinds of, see here, you can set the line style. Okay, so I have used hyphen as a line style over here. I have used some other line style over here. Okay, likewise you can use any different, that is, these and all are for impacting the user with different kinds of visualization. Okay, and you have bar charts. Okay, so bar charts you can categorize and see how many data you have values on that. And this is also a bar chart. This, since the values are too much, okay, so 0 to 800 we do have values, and hence it appears like a histogram, but it's actually a bar chart. Okay, and this again, this is a bar chart having two different distinguished identities, A and B. And this is a pie chart. See, the biggest advantage of this pie chart, you have 5 different categories. But if you want to highlight, in some cases, if you look at the TV news readers now and all, on the board they are touching this and it comes out as a separate piece. That is possible here. You can explode one particular piece alone, that is the UK alone, and you can show. Okay, so how much you want this particular piece to come out can be given by means of this explode. See here, explode I have given like this. Okay, 0.2 means first I will set everything to 0. You can see a normal okay, import I haven't executed. Yeah, you could see it's a plain explode. So now I want to explode only the America. Okay, so you can do like this. Okay, you can see just lighter movement. So this is another one pie chart. This is done with the help of a pie chart. And histograms. Histogram, why it looks like a bar chart is that the number of that is the width of the bars we haven't set. If you reduce the width of the bars, it look like a small line. Okay, so this is a 3D chart. You can have 3 different axes given in sequence, so that is always there. And this is one another advantage, right? You can have sub axes. Inside one graph you can have multiple sub graphs plotted, and you can visualize at a stretch. And this is horizontal bar chart and this is vertical bar chart. Both can be drawn on the same graph. Okay, whichever you want. Okay, so with this I'll just show you a data set for correlation, and we see how the correlation looks like. Now this is the data set you see. Actually there are 5 columns, 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. I have created here itself. Okay, so what I did is I have created a data frame, and I am for the first column I am adding values from 0 to 9. So np.a range of 0 to 10 means I'll be having values from 0 to 9. You can see. And in df of 1, in the next column I'm going to increment 2 for each value. Okay, so for x in df of 0, for every value I am going to increment 2. So the values will start with 2 and it will go till 11. So that's that we have. df2, I by myself have created something 2, 3, 4, 6, 8. So it's in positive order, but not exactly with the same interval, right? So 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, it is there. And then df of 3, third column, if you take 10 minus x, for x and df. So 10 minus 0, 10 minus 1, it is in decreasing order. So column 0 and column 3, if you take, those are inversely proportional. Okay. And df of 4 is equal to a, which means a I have created. So that is the data. Now this data, if you see, you yourself can see whether what kind of correlation it is between column 0 and column 1. Okay, when there is an increase in column 0 of unit type, you can see a column increase in, that is an unit increase in column 1 also, right? So both are positively correlated, that too perfectly positively correlated. Okay, and hence your values, correlation value should be +1. And if you see here between 0 to 2, actually if there is an increase in 0, there is an increase in 2 also, but not in the uniform level. So there exists a correlation, but not in the uniform level. So there should be some values between 0 to +1, right? Similarly, between 0 to 3, if you take, if there is an increase in column 0, there is a decrease in column 3, and hence it is negatively correlated. So the value should be -1. And if you take this 0 and 4, okay, so till 4, you have that is, no, you can see there is no particular relationship between these two, and hence there exists no correlation, right? So this is a heat map, right? Heat map is a kind of visualizing the data that you have by using this colors. Okay, it's very simple. Using the color indication, we can see, okay, so the occurrence, the mode of a particular value. Okay, so this actually, if you look at this entire data set, the minimum value is 0, and the minimum value is -2, and the maximum value is 40, right? So that is why 40 is indicated by white color, and this -2 is indicated. You can see there exists a simple sync, that is a few space after below 0, that is till -2, right? We can see 40 is indicated with white color. Okay, and this color coding goes on moving from white to black as you move yourself from highest value to lowest value. You can see this graph is an indicator of which values are more. Okay, you can see, since the white nearing to white, we have very less values. Most of the values are skewed near to the minimum value. That's what is the indication given here. Now the correlation of the columns can be calculated just by using the simple command called df1.corr of. Again, we draw the correlation heat map. With the correlation value computed, the heat map is being drawn over here. You can see already we have seen between 0 to 1, what is the correlation we have? It is actually +1. Okay, and between column 0 to what is that, column 4, we have negative correlation. Okay, between column 0 to column 4, you see there is a negative, column 3, there is a negative correlation -1. Okay, and hence the correlation value gets distributed, and you can visualize using this heat map. This is more important to understand whether you can proceed with the linear regression or not. Linear algorithms you can use only if the data is positively or negatively correlated. Okay, and before closing, we have some more basic things. Actually, I'll show you this data set. I have shown you this data set having some 100 values, right? So this is what is the data set I have uploaded here. So it is nd.csv. So if I print the shape, you can see you have 100 rows and 1 column. Okay, I'm printing the mean median mode. Okay, you can see, I'll just execute. Mean is 45.5. We have seen there. Median again is 45.5. Why? Because you have two values in between, sum divided by 2. Okay, 9 is 45. Okay, that is your median. And then mode, we have two modes because the occurrences of 45 and 46 are both 10 times or 9 times, I was not sure, and hence there are two different modes that are available, right? And you can see that. Let us see in detail about this box plot, and we can conclude. So this box plot is a very important operation that, see, actually if you look at, there is a center line here. This center line is nothing but the median or the mean which we have. You could see the mean value is 45.5, right? So now in the here I will show you Okay, what is the in yellow color I have indicated? So these are the mean. Okay, so in the initial your data set starts with 36, and what is the mean value or median value we have? Median value we have is 45. Okay, so now from this you go till the first value. Okay, whatever be the middle value among this, a total of 50 values are there. So what is the middle value of this? You should have taken from row 26 and 27, right? So what is the average? 43. So that is the first quartile that usually we normally say. Okay, so you could see. Yeah, first this is the median value 45.5, and this value. Okay, the sum of it is, sorry, the mean of it is what we call as the first quartile. And up above this, actually this line is the minimum value. We saw that minimum value is 36 on your data set, and this is your minimum value. And if you look at on the other hand, this is the maximum value. What is the maximum value we do have on the data set? It is 55. Okay, and 55 is the maximum value, this line, and this is median. So this is what we call it as your first quartile, and this is what we call it as the third quartile, right? How do you calculate these two? This is by using the values from minimum, what is 36, till this median. Okay, so what is the middle value you have? Again you arrange and find out the median. Okay, that's what we call it as this value. Again you arrange the values from this mean till your highest value, which is nothing but your 55, and that intermediate median is what we call as this one. Okay, now I'll show you. I'm including one more value, 100. Actually the values are not ranging, doesn't have any value in between. I'm including one more abrupt value called 100 inside your data. Now again I'll execute this. Only this and this box plot is enough to get executed. We could see that there exist two values over here. Why this is coming is I actually have included these values. That 3.9 is coming as another value. I'll delete that. I'll save. Okay. Okay, we have 101 values. Now you could see all the values are that is lowered in 36 from 55. Rather, we have only one data which is apparently lying outside of our range, and this is what we call it as our outlier. Okay, and this box plot is a very powerful means to identify whether it is actually a box plot or not. And one more important thing is, normally when we go for relative grading in IITs, even at VIT, we do have relative grading, meaning that if 10 faculty members are taking the class, okay, so all 10 will be evaluating the students of their own, in which case some faculty may be giving 96 as high marks, or somebody may be giving only 70 as the highest mark. So how will we taking the average of all the students, how to grade? Okay, so that becomes a question, and that's where these kind of distributions come into use. Okay, so the normal distribution will be used in practice, and the average of the class will be calculated. From there, how whoever is getting 1 sigma, you award this marks. Within 2 sigma, you award this marks. Okay, and hence there will exist a impartiality among the entire student community, irrespective of the faculty who is bothering. So like the same way, this box plot is also be used when to consider it as an outlier. So actually from the median, if it falls between 1.5 sigma times this quartile is, I'll remove and show you again. I'll remove this value and I'll execute this again. Okay, so this is what we call as your third quartile. So from here, 1.5 times sigma, if the value falls within that range, that we will consider for calculating with machine learning algorithm. If the data goes beyond that, we'll be removing it as a, considering it as an outlier. Similarly, on the other side also, this first quartile minus 1.5 sigma, your value lies down, then we say it is. So that's why on grading also what we do, from the median, Okay, 1.5 times sigma will calculate, and if any students falls above that, we say they are all S grades. Okay, they'll be awarded with an outlier and they'll be awarded S grades. And if it goes down also, you can assume it either to be on the E grade or the F grade depending on the policy. Okay, so these are all how we can analyze using the box plot and the normal distribution that we have at our hand. And I hope I'm done with my presentation for today. So Google Colab alone, I will show you. Hope most of you might be using it. Google Colab is a collaborative environment that is available for researchers and the students to use with if we are not provided with the GPU service, most probably. Okay, so you don't want the Jupyter Notebook installed now itself. Type Google Collaboratory. It will ask you to join with your Gmail ID, login, and when you use new notebook, you could see a Jupyter Notebook environment inside the internet itself. It's a cloud-based environment, and they provide a lot of servers at free of cost. See, the same environment you can get. Okay, so the infrastructure you can use at your ease. Okay, but make sure that don't use any of your confidential research data onto that. It's a cooperative laboratory. So collaborative laboratory, sorry. So and the data surety we can't assure. So it's my personal advice or message for all of you. Otherwise, it's very good to start with. Okay, you can have code cell, you can have text cell. Suppose if I type 2 plus 3, if you execute, you can see the output here itself. The only thing is you should have a proper internet connection. That's it. Okay, to start with, you can start with this. Okay, so I hope I'm done with today's agenda.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. There are two questions, ma'am, from participant side. The first question is like, so what is chi-square test and how it, where it can be applied?
Pardon, ma'am, your voice is breaking.
Yeah, the question was, ma'am, they've asked us like how the chi-square test it works.
Chi-square test normally when we have different samples taken from a population, we'll be taking the mean of each sample, the average of each sample, and we'll find out how each sample differs from the population or the standard deviation. So that's where we normally use chi-square. That is, if you have multiple subgroups divided from a very large group, and if you want to understand how each group differs from the total population, we go for this chi-square test. There are multiple cases as such. When you go for ensemble learning, it's the most important thing that we need to understand. Ensemble, when you divide your data into multiple data sets and when you give it to a different process for understanding, once it comes back, how will you analyze the result? That's where one of the measure is chi-square test.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The next question is, ma'am, like in bar chart, how to show the value on the chart?
Yeah, you can write unnot is equal to true. That is, it depends on the version that you use. See, in PyPlot or Seaborn, there are parameters that are using which you can do. AN and OT, I hope. It is equal to true. If you get give, automatically it displays the value on the bar chart.
Yes, ma'am. So there's one more question, ma'am. How to calculate the table values manually?
Which table, ma'am?
Shripad Deshpande has mentioned the question that way. Shripad Deshpande, are you online?
Yeah, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Yeah, can you just clarify your doubt?
Yeah, ma'am. Madam, when we are comparing like table calculated value and table value in statistics, when we are doing when we are seeing table values from the table works which is already made, so is there any calculation part, ma'am, for doing the table values calculation manually?
No. I hope you are asking about the error calculation, right?
When see for in hypothesis, null hypothesis, in a testing of hypothesis, we are doing F calculated value and we are comparing with F tabulated value.
Yeah, that's what, it's mere simple subtraction only. Normally we go for actual value, predicted value, right?
Yeah, ma'am, but the table value we are seeing from the table work, it's already made.
Oh, you are talking in terms of programming.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we
Okay.
calculate the table values manually? Like we are doing the problem solving
Uh,
in the like calculated value. Can we calculate like the table values? Is there any?
After, see, the question I am not understanding actually. Actually, I'm assuming that you are applying an algorithm and it gives you one output, right? Predicted value. You are asking whether those values you can obtain manually.
No, ma'am.
Uh,
Like we are having the table values in already made
okay,
table
you have
values.
an Excel having a table, right?
Not Excel. I am asking regarding only the theory part, not in the
Okay,
practical one.
okay.
When we are doing in the theory, F calculator value and F tabulator value. F
Mm.
calculator, we are doing the problem solving, we are getting the F calculator value by doing the formula.
Mm.
How we have to calculate the F tabulator value? By manually, man, not by seeing in the book. We are having some 0.5, 0.23,
But
0.55.
that is a defined table, I hope, sir. I'm not very sure on the mathematics part of it, but for all the t-test, chi-square test, everything, no, the values are given in the tabulated format which we normally use.
Yes, yes. Can't
Okay,
we
so
calculate
again, yeah, because I'm not sure about the mathematics behind it's too mathematical. We normally go for taking up the values from the table, which are
Yeah,
talking about
yeah,
T value, F value, everything we normally take from there.
table
That
value.
also now this Python implementer will automatically give.
Okay,
Okay, so implementation perspective, we never go for it.
okay, ma'am. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
There's
you.
one more question, ma'am. Like,
Yes, sir.
is predictor variable quantitative or qualitative?
It could be on the either side.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so anything like it could be either as quantitative or see, for example, if there is a student data set, right? So the student names and roll number, if you take roll number, if it is numbers, we say it is quantitative. But even then, if you understand the meaning of it, it's not quantitative. So actually, you can have a both quantitative value as qualitative value on the data set.
Yes, ma'am. There's just one more question, ma'am. Could you suggest a platform to learn big data and ML?
Actually, both, if you see ML, no, ML has a class of algorithms which you need to understand. And big data is something different. Big data is the platform to understand how to work with a variety of data on a large scale. So both are different. So ML, first we need to understand even on a small data set how to come out with decision making and all, but big data doesn't hold like so. It is it tells us how to work with a very big environment and on the textual data rather than the numeric sorry, this kind of structured data. It more works to aligns towards unstructured data. So platform nowadays, all digital learning tools are available. So
Okay. Yes,
no
ma'am.
issues.
Next is any standard books to learn data science?
And if you and regarding books and all, no, nowadays no one is getting aligned towards the theory part. Okay, so I should not tell this as a teacher. Understanding the basics is very much important, but when you go for implementation perspective, it's more important to get into and a clear understanding on the latest technologies rather than what is defined in the textbook. For
Yes, ma'am.
understanding the baseline and the theory, we can go for referring to the textbook. For machine learning, Tom Mitchell book is the basic baseline that we have. From there, lot many have evolved. Okay, so for implementation, you can look at the implementation perspective of it, and you this towards data science is one very important and very generic portal that is. And if you are a beginner level, this analytics vidya will do. They have explained all the things in a very simple manner, and for understanding the theory you can refer to the books, but for implementation definitely the latest understanding and the concepts would be of use rather than the textual understanding. It's not like C or C++ where we have a defined structure and we should roam around only with this structure. Nowadays, in these kind of environments, lot many technologies are coming, advancements are coming, and it would be of use to the student or the researcher community to get in touch with the latest trends rather than the theoretical aspects. I
Yes.
hope so, but it's not a standardized answer for this.
Yes, ma'am. And the last question is, ma'am, like they've asked us about the discrete variable and hypothesis testing.
Yeah, discrete variables in an Excel file, if you filter a column, if you have only few values like 4 or 5 or any finite 10 value, we say it is discrete. Okay. So wherever you go, even if you have 10,000 data, if you feel like only a few variables or few values are repeating, let's say student grades. Okay, only you can have grades like S, A, B, C, D, E, and F. Okay, no more than, even if you have 1,000 students or 10,000 students, only the grades can be of this six kind. That kind is what we call as discrete. Otherwise, if you take marks and all, 95.5 is also a mark, 95.55 is also a mark. You can't restrict on how many values you can have in between 0 to 100. That is continuous. What else is the other part of the question, ma'am?
Hello?
Yeah. What
Yes.
else is the other part of the question, ma'am? There is one more.
Discrete variable and hypothesis testing, ma'am.
Yeah, that's what hypothesis testing is, to prove that your decision is perfect on the population set. Okay, you can better understand as a concept of proof of contradiction. Actually, it is like when we are trying to decide on something, when we feel like this could be done, okay, how to prove whether our assumption is correct or not. That's where we go for hypothesis testing. Hypothesis, in the sense, it's not a proven statement. We are telling a statement. In order to prove that our statement is correct, we say that we initially said that our statement is wrong, and or the alternate of our statement is correct, and upon processing, if we end up with a positive result, we take the alternate, or else we go for the null hypothesis. That is hypothesis testing.
Yes, ma'am. And just one more thing, ma'am, like what is the difference between data mining and ML? Or both the same? They're asking a question.
No, not both are same. There could be similarity, but we won't say both are same. Actually, mining is trying to explore or invent knowledge from an existing data set. So you have enough knowledge that we have in our repository. From the repository, we are trying to infer a knowledge. Okay, that's what is data mining. But here in machine learning, it's not like so. We'll be trying to come out with new kind of output also from a data set. Both has a little difference, actually, not exactly the same. But if you look at, there are some concepts like your decision tree and naive Bayes which will exist in both the cases, because both naive Bayes and decision tree, if you see, they are non-parametric models, in the sense that it works only with the data set that you have at your hand. Okay, you give a data set, have 1,000 columns. So any of the result that exists from the 1,000 data set, you can get as an output, not more than that in either of the model. But if you see the perceptron models and all, you give 1,000 data set. If you give 1,001th entity as a new complete entity, it will give you an output, right? In which case it completely differs from data mining. Okay, so data mining is extraction of knowledge from a known knowledge source that you have at your hand.
Yes, ma'am. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So I would like to thank Suganya ma'am for today's session. So it was really very informative. The importance of statistics for machine learning, and what are the statistical measures we have, and how these statistical measures can be used for mining the knowledge out of the data using the machine learning techniques. So this is what we learned today, ma'am. It was really excellent, and both both the conceptual knowledge, and also you have demonstrated us the hands-on experience, like how to work with the Jupyter notebook and Google Colab, and using the Python, how we can mine some basic statistics out of the data. So that was also very nice, ma'am. So thank you, ma'am, for today's session. And yes, ma'am, thank you, ma'am. This is for the audience. So tomorrow we'll be having the same time, 10:30, and the topic is like development of the machine learning models. So we'll all meet you tomorrow, and the feedback link also shared by tomorrow end of session. Thank you all. Thank you. We'll be sharing the we'll be sharing the workshop materials at the end of session. Thank you all. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.